Star Fox, a series that really got me obsessed with on-rail shooters over the years. This list will be based on how fun and interesting I think each game is. So without further ado, let's get to it. The very first Star Fox back from 1993. It is an absolute marvel that this is even running on the SNES. This is as surprising as Super Monkey Ball Jr. on the GBA. So again, this is an on-rail shooter where you fly around the screen through different worlds and fight bosses. You could even switch from 4 different control types if there's one you prefer. This is a sick game, but it's definitely not the best one to always come back to. The controls are horrendous because you move with a D-pad, but unless you're playing this on the Switch or emulated, you can use a stick, but still not as great. But this game also chugs. I mean, look what's happening on screen, of course it's gonna chug. This experience is worth it if you're curious, but I wouldn't say anything else beyond that. This can be questionable as to why it took 24 years to make this. Star Fox 64 is basically the second game, so what's the point of this? This whole game is all-range combat, and the objective is to destroy all the enemy bases and battleships. You'll also run into fighter ships you'll have to take out if you can't avoid them. The combat, like I said, is all-range, and the controls still have the same stiffness. And while you're on the battleships or planets, your R-Wing can transform into its walker mode and run like an ostrich. It's kind of funny, and it was in Star Fox Zero before this came out. So I find this to be a little better than the first game, and I wouldn't put it any higher than this. This spin-off was an odd detour for the Star Fox franchise. Instead of on-rail shooting, you're switching from different monitors shooting bots in a maze where you have to protect a defense tower. This concept is creative, but is not really up my alley. There is amiibo support, but it's just a screen wipe and only works once a day. I don't really see myself touching this game again because I prefer on-rail shooting than protecting defense towers. This is a DS title, so as you'd expect, most of this game is dedicated to the touchscreen. You're going to like or hate this depending on how much you like these kind of controls. You move with the touchscreen, you double tap the top of the touchscreen to boost, and the bottom half for the brakes. Swipe to do a barrel roll, L or the D-pad to shoot, and the somersault and flip turn have been set to buttons on the touchscreen. These controls are not really that good and you automatically do U-turns. This is a game that's not as good as I expected, and there are other touchscreen games on the DS that I much more prefer. And here's a game where you aren't flying your ship most of the time. You're playing as Crystal for like the first 25 minutes, then you're flying around as Fox for the next 2 minutes, then you're playing on foot again. Nintendo literally just tried to combine Zelda into Star Fox, which doesn't really do it much for me. I like how the controls feel like a casual 3D Zelda game, but just like 90% of the Zelda games, you can't jump. This game takes away most of what Star Fox is and makes it mostly different. The game's still great and all and it's playable, but the big change in concept is not completely what I'm into. I prefer the original formula, so this game is in my bottom 5. Now this is much more traditional. This came out after Star Fox Adventures and is much more up my alley. There are still on-foot sections, but they're cut shorter and I find them more enjoyable. You move faster in these sections and you can use your blaster and control the Landmaster. The controls are nice and you can actually change them. This is what they should have done for Star Fox Adventures. This is a much shorter game, but a damn better one if I'm not wrong. You might prefer Adventures over this if you're more into the Zelda feel, but unless you're me, you'll be like, F*** Adventures, play this instead. So this technically counts if you're playing the Switch version because the entire story includes Star Fox. This game is just incredible and was the last of the Toys of Life games to release before the series died. Except for Amiibo, because they have uses for multiple games instead of one unlike other figures. And it's Nintendo. Most of what they release doesn't shit the bed. But anyway, this game is not an on-rail shooter and is instead an entirely open-world game where you have to complete a bunch of missions and side quests. It might not sound that great for a game like this, but believe me, it really is. Unlike most Star Fox games, you could play as a nice selection of different characters. And along with that, that, you can select from multiple different ships as well, and you play with all this on your controller. You link them to this mount that you have to use with your Joy-Cons. This may feel weird to hold, but I like it, and no other game really plays like this besides the DC Hero Portal game. You can even use different weapons that you attach to your ships and all have different attributes and usages. Another cool thing about this is that you can customize your ships at any time on the fly, although it's not as cool as you'd expect because you can only mess with the wings. But it's not that bad seeing as you can put them upside down, backwards, and even stack them. But it can add weight to your ship, so you need to be careful with how much you link. While playing, you'll explore different planets, do a bunch of missions and side quests like I said, and discover different creatures. The controls might take some getting used to on land and in space, but it's really great once you get the hang of it. You'll also need to take down stuff like towers, primes, and even battleships. But here's the thing though, after you beat the game, there's not much else to do besides discover more creatures, complete other side quests, and take down any battleships or primes that appear after a while. This game is awesome, but the replay value is not really that luring. This was the first one I ever played, and it was on my Wii, so I always played it with a GameCube controller. The feel to this is really a lot better than the first game. You also have to love the voice acting they attempted for this.
We're entering Corneria City now. Something's wrong with the G-diffuser. Do a barrel roll.
Whoa! Help me!
They would sound a lot more ridiculous in other games like Star Fox Adventures. The dynamic missions are very fun and give this game a lot of replay value. If you haven't played this, you need to try it. This could be interchanged with the original depending on what differences you prefer. I prefer this one because you can change the controls. Gyro controls are even optional, but I don't really mess with them. The voice acting might not be the same, you play on a smaller screen. I don't really mind as much. If you're way more nostalgic, you might prefer the original over this. I don't know who the hell would agree with me, considering the fact that this is in the top 30 worst Wii U games. I can definitely see people hating these controls. You move with a stick, and you aim your shots with gyro controls with the gamepad. The rest of the buttons are mixed around very weirdly. You get a regular view on the TV and a third-person view on the gamepad. This could be a pain to get used to, but it's kind of as unique as Gamer from Game & Wario, because once you get to the all-range sections, you have to be focusing on the TV and gamepad for different views constantly. You may have to reset your cursor to aim many times, but I got really used to these controls in like a day. The locations for these levels are all amazing, although the two levels where you use a hovercraft are not as fun. But the R-Wing in its walker mode is a lot more fun than the hovercraft and you use it a little more. And I find these boss fights to be incredible. It's not always a straight view while fighting them on the TV, so you need to look at your gamepad for more precise shots, which I find to be pretty fun to do. There's also amiibo support, and it's a lot better than Star Fox Guards. If you scan in Fox, you can play the classic R-Wing with SNES-style shots and Nova Bombs. And with Falco, you can play as the black R-Wing that deals but also takes twice the damage. But I don't have the amiibo, so I never got to try these. I have a friend who really dislikes this game, so I thought I'd invite him to explain why.
The multiplayer is not great. With it splitting the controls, it could feel very lackluster. It splits the controls between player 1 and player 2, with the gamepad being the shooter and player 2 controlling the controls, which could in theory be fun, but in execution it's not really janky. It's just overall not great.
Thanks for the speech, Brian. And there you have it, my ranking of every Star Fox game. Let me know what your opinions are down in the comments. And with that, I'll catch y'all later. Peace.